My name is Duke Montgomery, 68 years old, and I still remember the look on my daughter Sarah's face when she turned away from me at gate B47 at JFK Airport. A moment of hesitation, then nothing. No goodbye, no see you later. Just the backs of my family as they boarded a plane to Hawaii without me. The pain was instant, like a knife to my chest. I pulled out my phone, called my pilot, and headed toward the private terminal. If their flight was taking off to paradise, my inheritance plans were about to make a permanent landing. Let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey of betrayal and justice. I wasn't always wealthy enough to own a private jet. For most people, that statement alone sounds ridiculous, but it's the truth. I started with nothing but determination and a small loan from my father back in 1975, $5,000, and a dream to build something lasting in commercial real estate. Those early years were brutal. 16-hour days, sleeping on a pull-out couch in my first tiny office, cold calls until my voice gave out. But brick by brick, deal by deal, I built Montgomery Properties into what it is today, a portfolio worth just north of $800 million. Through it all, my wife Angela was my rock. We met at a diner where she waited tables while putting herself through nursing school. I was just a hungry kid with big plans and barely enough money for coffee and a sandwich. She believed in me when nobody else did. We married young, both 22, in a simple ceremony at her parents' backyard in New Jersey. For 35 years, she was everything to me. Partner, confidant, my moral compass when deals got tough and competitors played dirty. Sarah came along when we were both 28. From the moment the doctor placed her in my arms, I was completely wrapped around her tiny finger. Our only child, she became the center of our universe. Angela and I agreed on one thing above all else. Sarah would have every opportunity we never had, but she would also understand the value of hard work and compassion. As a little girl, Sarah was exceptionally bright. She was reading by age 4, skipped second grade entirely, and graduated high school as valedictorian. I remember sitting in the audience during her speech, tears streaming down my face, Angela squeezing my hand as our daughter spoke eloquently about future possibilities and the importance of kindness. That day, I felt like I had accomplished something truly meaningful in my life, far beyond any business success. We paid for her education at Princeton, where she studied economics. No student loans for my girl. She graduated with honors and immediately landed a position at a prestigious consulting firm in Manhattan. Angela and I were bursting with pride. Our daughter was not only brilliant but independent, or so we thought. Then Thomas entered the picture. He was handsome, smooth-talking, with an MBA from Wharton and a job at an investment bank. On paper, he looked perfect, but something about him set off alarm bells for me from their first date. Maybe it was the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, or how he seemed more interested in my business than in truly knowing Sarah. Angela told me I was being overprotective, that Sarah was a grown woman who could make her own choices. Against my better judgment, I kept my concerns to myself. When Thomas proposed after just 10 months of dating, I gave my blessing because Sarah's happiness meant everything to me. Their wedding was extravagant, something Thomas insisted upon. I happily paid the $300,000 bill because I wanted my daughter's special day to be perfect. Soon after, the grandkids came along. Jason arrived first, followed by Megan 2 years later. Those children became the absolute joy of my later years. Jason, now 12, inherited his mother's intelligence and, I like to think, my determination. Megan, 10, was artistic and sensitive, with Angela's kind heart and intuitive nature. Angela and I adored being grandparents. We would take the kids for weekends, spoiling them with trips to museums, baseball games, and their favorite restaurants. I taught Jason how to fish at my lake house upstate. Angela showed Megan how to bake her famous apple pie. Those years were some of the happiest of my life. When the kids were 7 and 5, Angela was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim from the start. We sought every treatment, consulted specialists across the country, but within 8 months, she was gone. I remember the last thing she said to me, holding my hand in that hospital room. "Take care of our Sarah and those babies, Duke, and don't forget to take care of yourself too." The grief nearly destroyed me. For months, I was just going through the motions, showing up at the office but delegating most decisions to my executive team. Sarah stepped up during this time, checking on me daily, bringing the kids over to brighten my too-quiet house. It was during this period that I began to really financially support Sarah and Thomas, beyond what I had already given them. I had already purchased their 5-bedroom house in Westchester as a wedding gift, paid for private schools for both children, and covered the cost of their luxury vehicles. After Angela died, I added them to accounts, paid for lavish family vacations, and never questioned when Sarah needed money for household expenses or when Thomas mentioned investment opportunities. My financial advisor cautioned me about setting boundaries, but I dismissed his concerns. They were family, after all. Looking back, I can see how my generosity may have sent the wrong message. But in my grief, having my family close was worth any amount of money. And truthfully, I enjoyed being the provider, the patriarch who could make problems disappear with a signature on a check. It made me feel needed in a world that suddenly felt empty without Angela by my side. The changes were subtle at first, so subtle that I questioned whether I was imagining things. About a year after Angela passed, I noticed that Sarah's phone calls became less frequent. What once was daily check-ins gradually became weekly, then mostly when they needed something. When I would call her, the conversations felt rushed, like I was an obligation rather than her father. Family dinners at my home, which had been a Sunday tradition even before Angela's passing, were often canceled last minute. There was always a reasonable excuse. Jason had a soccer tournament. Megan was invited to a birthday party. Thomas had an important work call. I understood that life was busy, especially with 2 active children, but a pattern was emerging that I couldn't ignore. Then Thomas began asking questions about my business, not casual inquiries, but pointed questions about property values, cash flow, and my retirement plans. At a rare family dinner at their home, he cornered me while Sarah was putting the kids to bed. "Duke, have you considered stepping back from day-to-day operations?" he asked, swirling an expensive scotch I had gifted him for Christmas. "A man your age should be enjoying life, not worrying about tenant complaints and property taxes." "I enjoy my work," I replied simply. "Keeps my mind sharp." "Of course, but the stress can't be good for your health," he pressed. "Sarah worries about you, you know. We both think it might be time to consider a succession plan." That conversation left me uneasy, but I chalked it up to concern, perhaps misplaced but well-intentioned. Then I discovered something troubling. My executive assistant, Marion, who had been with me for 20 years, brought me a file with a worried expression. "Mr. Montgomery, I found these credit inquiries in your name that I don't recognize," she said, "and there were some calls from someone claiming to represent you, asking about transferring property titles." I investigated and discovered that someone had been making inquiries about my assets, using personal information that very few people had access to. I didn't confront Sarah or Thomas immediately. Instead, I hired a private investigator, something I never thought I'd do regarding my own family. What he uncovered was disturbing. Thomas's investment firm was in serious financial trouble. He had made several high-risk investments that failed spectacularly, and he was leveraged to the hilt. They were maintaining their lavish lifestyle through credit cards and loans, falling behind on payments despite the substantial support I was already providing. One evening, I stopped by their house unannounced with a gift for Megan's school achievement. I could hear raised voices from the home office as the housekeeper let me in. Not wanting to embarrass anyone, I waited quietly in the foyer, but their words carried clearly. "We can't keep living like this, Thomas." Sarah's voice was strained. "The credit cards are maxed out, and the bank called again about the boat payment. Your father is sitting on a fortune while we're drowning," Thomas replied angrily. "If he would just sign over the Westchester properties like we discussed, our problems would be solved." "He'll never do that," Sarah sighed. "You know how he is about the business." "Then we need to move forward with the other plan," Thomas said, his voice lower now. "The consultation with Dr. Levine is next week. Once we have his assessment, we can proceed with the guardianship petition." I don't know if I can do that to Dad. Sarah sounded hesitant. Do you want to lose this house? Do you want the kids pulled out of their schools? Your father is almost 70, Sarah. The business is too much for him anyway. We'd be doing him a favor. Besides, that memory care facility in Connecticut is like a 5-star resort. He'll be fine. I slipped out before they realized I was there, my heart pounding in my chest. The other plan became crystal clear. They were planning to have me declared incompetent, take control of my assets, and place me in a facility. My own daughter and the man she married were conspiring to take everything I had built. Still, a part of me wanted to believe I had misunderstood, that there was some explanation that didn't involve such a profound betrayal. So I decided to set a trap, to give them one last chance to prove me wrong. The next time I saw them, I was carefully casual, giving no indication of what I had overheard. I've been thinking, I said over dinner at their house, watching their expressions closely. It might be time for a big family vacation. Hawaii, perhaps. My treat, of course. We could all use some sunshine and relaxation. The way their faces lit up confirmed my suspicions. It wasn't the prospect of family time that excited them, but the opening they thought I was giving them. That sounds wonderful, Dad, Sarah said, squeezing my hand with what I now recognized as calculated affection. When were you thinking? Within the next month, I replied. And while we're there, I could meet with my lawyers about updating some of my affairs. It might be a good time to discuss the future of the business. Thomas couldn't hide his eagerness. Absolutely, Duke. That's very responsible planning. I'd be happy to sit in on those meetings if you'd like another perspective. I'm sure he would, I thought grimly. But I smiled and nodded, already formulating my real plan. Planning the Hawaii trip became my singular focus over the next few weeks. Not because I was excited about palm trees and ocean views, but because I needed to construct the perfect scenario to confirm what I already suspected in my heart. I booked first-class tickets for Sarah, Thomas, and the kids, reserved 3 connecting suites at the Four Seasons in Maui, arranged private tours, surfing lessons for the grandkids, and a chartered yacht for deep-sea fishing. Dad, this is too much, Sarah protested weakly when I showed her the itinerary, though her eyes betrayed her excitement. You're spending a fortune. What else is money for, if not to create memories with the people I love? I replied, watching her face for any sign of remorse. There was none. Thomas was particularly interested in my mention of meeting lawyers in Hawaii. He brought it up repeatedly, fishing for details in what he thought was a subtle manner. So these lawyers in Hawaii, they specialize in estate planning? He asked during dinner at my home the week before our trip. Among other things, I answered vaguely. I've been thinking it's time to organize things properly. Make sure everyone is taken care of. Very wise, he nodded enthusiastically. You know, I've been reading about some interesting trust structures that might help minimize estate taxes when the time comes. I bet you have, I thought. The day before we were scheduled to leave, I called my oldest friend, Frank Donovan. Frank and I went back 50 years, roommates in college who had remained close through marriages, children, career changes, and losses. He was also one of the sharpest estate attorneys in New York, though he was now semi-retired. I need your help, Frank, I said after explaining what I had discovered and what I suspected. Frank was silent for a long moment. Duke, I hope you're wrong about this, but if you're not, what do you need me to do? I need you to prepare for the worst-case scenario, I explained. If they fail this test, I want everything ready to protect what's mine and make sure they can't touch it. And the test? I explained my plan. I would deliberately miss our commercial flight to Hawaii, creating a situation where Sarah and Thomas would have to choose between waiting for me or continuing their journey without me. Given what I had overheard about their financial desperation and plans for my care, I was almost certain they would choose the latter. That's a hell of a test, Duke, Frank said softly. Are you prepared for what happens if they fail it? I have to know the truth, I replied. And if it's what I think it is, then yes, I'm prepared to do what's necessary. Then I'll have everything ready, he promised. Just give me the signal. The night before our departure, I called Gary, my pilot of 15 years. Though I often flew commercial for convenience, I maintained a Gulfstream G650 for business travel and had a full-time pilot on staff. Gary, I may need the jet ready tomorrow morning on short notice, I said. Possible destination LaGuardia, with a return trip to Maui the following day. Everything all right, sir? Gary asked with concern. Just contingency planning, I assured him. Let's hope we don't need it. With all the pieces in place, I went to bed that night with a heavy heart. A part of me was praying I was wrong, that my suspicions were just the paranoid thoughts of a grieving widower who had lost his anchor. But the businessman in me, the part that had survived and thrived in the cutthroat world of New York real estate for over 4 decades, knew better. Trust but verify had always been my motto in business. I never thought I'd have to apply it to my own daughter. The morning of our departure arrived with perfect weather, sunny and clear. I had arranged for a car service to pick up all of us, stopping at my home first, then proceeding to Sarah and Thomas's house before heading to JFK. I deliberately left my passport in my home safe, ensuring I would have to return for it. As we loaded luggage into the SUV, I patted my pockets with an exaggerated gesture of concern. "Everything okay, Dad?" Sarah asked, checking her phone distractedly. "I think I forgot my passport," I said, feigning distress. "It must still be in the safe." Thomas immediately looked at his watch. "We need to get going if we're going to make it through security in time." "You all go ahead," I suggested. "I'll grab my passport and catch up. Worst case, I'll take a later flight and meet you there tonight." "Are you sure?" Sarah asked, though she was already ushering the children into the vehicle. "Absolutely," I assured them. "No sense in everyone missing the flight. I'll call you when I'm on my way." They agreed with minimal protest, exactly as I had anticipated. The true test would come later, at the airport, when I would call with a more significant delay. I watched the car pull away, then went back inside. I did have my passport, of course. It was securely in my jacket pocket the whole time. I changed clothes, called for my own car, and made my way to the airport separately. I needed to be there to witness their choice firsthand. 2 hours later, I called Sarah from inside the terminal. I could see them from a distance, waiting at gate B47 for their flight to Honolulu. I made sure to stay out of sight. "Sarah, honey, I've hit a snog," I explained. "They pulled my bag for additional screening, and now they're saying I need to go through some additional security checks because of some confusion with another passenger with a similar name." "Dad, they're about to start boarding," she said, impatience clear in her voice. "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. Can you all wait? They're saying it could be another 30 to 45 minutes, but I'm trying to get them to hurry." There was a pause. Then I heard her discussing with Thomas, their voices slightly muffled as though she had partially covered the phone. "Dad, we can't miss this flight. The kids are excited, and we'd lose our connection in Honolulu to Maui." "I understand," I said, keeping my voice neutral despite the pain blossoming in my chest. "What if I book you all on a later flight? We could all travel together this evening instead." "No," she said firmly. "We should stick to the plan. You can catch the next flight out and meet us there. The hotel is all arranged, and we'll be fine." "All right," I agreed, watching as the gate agent began the boarding announcements. "I'll try to make it out today. Have a safe flight." I ended the call and moved closer, still staying partially hidden behind a pillar. I watched as my family gathered their carry-on bags, preparing to board. Sarah was checking her phone, probably to see if I was calling back. Thomas looked relieved, already guiding the children toward the priority boarding line. It was the moment of truth. I stepped out from my hiding place and walked briskly toward the gate. "Sarah!" I called out, loud enough to be heard over the terminal noise but not shouting. She turned, surprise registering on her face when she saw me. For a brief moment, I thought I saw guilt in her eyes. Thomas's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Dad, what are you doing here? I thought you were stuck in security." "I wanted to see you off," I said simply, watching her face carefully. "Make sure you got on the flight okay." "We're fine," Thomas cut in. "But they're boarding now. We need to go." "Can't you wait just a little longer?" I asked, looking directly at my daughter. "I'm sure they can sort this out soon, and we can all fly together as planned." The moment stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the brief flicker of something that might have been shame before her expression hardened into resolve. "We really can't miss this connection, Dad," she said. not quite meeting my eyes. You understand, right? Just come on the next flight. We'll see you tonight in Maui. And with that, she turned away. Thomas put his hand on her lower back, guiding her toward the gate. My grandchildren looked confused, Jason turning back to wave at me hesitantly while Megan called out, "See you later, Grandpa." But Sarah didn't look back again. They handed their boarding passes to the agent and disappeared down the jetway. I stood there, watching the door close behind them, feeling as though something inside me had died. The test was complete, and they had failed it spectacularly. As I stood alone at gate B47, watching the door close behind my family, a strange calm settled over me. The bustling airport continued around me, passengers rushing to gates, announcements blaring overhead, but I felt suspended in a bubble of silence. 68 years of life, decades of business experience, and nothing had prepared me for the ice-cold reality of being abandoned by my only child. I moved to the window and watched as their plane was pushed back from the gate. Inside that metal tube were the people I loved most in this world, the ones I would have given everything for without hesitation, and they couldn't wait 45 minutes for me. An elderly couple beside me noticed my expression. The woman touched my arm gently. "Did you miss your flight, dear?" "No," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I missed something much more important, I'm afraid." I turned away from the window as their plane taxied toward the runway. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Sorry about the rush, Dad. Text when you get your new flight info. See you in Maui." No acknowledgement of what had just happened. No recognition of the line that had been crossed. Just the expectation that I would follow along, boarding a commercial flight alone to join the family vacation that I was funding, where they planned to discuss putting me in a memory care facility while dividing up my assets. I texted back, "Have a safe flight." Nothing more. Then I called Gary, my pilot. "How quickly can we be ready to fly?" "The Gulfstream is fueled and ready, sir," he replied promptly. "Where are we headed?" "LaGuardia first," I said. "I need to make a stop in the city. Then Maui tomorrow, possibly. We can be wheels up in 40 minutes if you can get to the private terminal," Gary confirmed. "I'll be there in 20. I made one more call as I walked briskly through the terminal, heading toward the exit where I would find a taxi to take me to the private aviation area. "Frank," I said when my old friend answered. "They failed the test. Completely." There was a heavy sigh on the other end. "I'm sorry, Duke. Truly sorry. Have everything ready," I instructed. "I'm coming to your office now." The taxi ride to the private terminal was a blur. I found myself staring at the family photo on my phone's wallpaper. Sarah, Thomas, Jason, and Megan at the beach last summer. All smiles and sunburned noses. I wondered if it had all been an act, or if there had been genuine love there once that had been corrupted by greed. Boarding my private jet felt surreal. The luxury cabin that I usually filled with business associates or family was empty except for me. Gary greeted me with his usual professional courtesy, though I could see concern in his eyes. "Everything all right, Mr. Montgomery?" "Just a change of plans, Gary," I said, sinking into the leather seat. "Family decided to go ahead without me." He nodded discreetly, knowing better than to pry. "We'll have you in the city in 20 minutes, sir." As we took off, I gazed out the window at the same sky that was carrying my family to Hawaii. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. They were flying commercial, believing I would follow like an obedient puppy, while I was actually in my private jet, preparing to ensure they would never control my destiny. The jet's phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Frank. "I've gathered the team," he said without preamble. "My office in an hour? I'll be there," I confirmed. "And Frank? I want everything we discussed ready to execute. All of it. Already in motion. Duke." The short flight gave me time to process what had happened. I thought about Sarah as a little girl, her small hand in mine as we walked through Central Park, her delight at feeding the ducks, her absolute trust in me. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike, bandaging skinned knees, cheering at soccer games. I remembered how she had clung to me at Angela's funeral, both of us broken by grief. Where had that Sarah gone? Had Thomas changed her so completely? Or had the seeds of this betrayal always been there, waiting for the right conditions to grow? By the time we landed at LaGuardia, my grief had crystallized into resolve. I texted Sarah once more. Flight delayed further. Will update when I know more. Maintaining the pretense for now. The car Frank sent was waiting as I exited the private terminal. 30 minutes later, I was walking into the prestigious law offices of Donovan, Walsh, and Peters on Park Avenue, where Frank had been a named partner for over 30 years. Frank was waiting in the conference room, along with 2 younger attorneys and a forensic accountant I recognized from previous business dealings. The sight of their serious faces, the stacks of documents, the air of grim determination, made it all real in a way it hadn't been before. Duke, Frank, stood to greet me, embracing me briefly. At 70, he was still imposing, his white hair and piercing blue eyes giving him the look of a distinguished statesman rather than a retired attorney. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. So do I, old friend, I replied, taking a seat at the head of the table. But here we are. Before we begin, Frank said carefully, I want to ask one more time. Are you certain about this? Absolutely certain, because what we're about to do will change your relationship with Sarah forever. I appreciated his caution, his understanding of the magnitude of what I was contemplating. I thought once more of the airport, of Sarah turning away without a backward glance. I'm certain, I said firmly. They were planning to have me declared incompetent, Frank, to put me away and take everything. My own daughter. Frank nodded gravely, then turned to the team. Let's proceed. For the next 2 hours, we went through document after document. New wills, trust formations, asset transfers, company restructuring. Everything designed to protect my legacy from those who sought to take it prematurely. As we worked, Frank shared additional information his investigative team had uncovered about Thomas. He's in deeper trouble than you thought, Frank explained, sliding a folder across the table. 3 failed hedge funds in the past decade, each time walking away while investors lost everything. 2 lawsuits settled confidentially, and gambling debts to some very unsavory characters in Atlantic City. How did Sarah not know about this? I asked, though I suspected the answer. She likely knew some of it, the forensic accountant interjected. Based on their financial records, they've been living well beyond their means for years. The private school tuition alone would be impossible on their declared income. And there's more, Frank added reluctantly. Thomas has already contacted several geriatric psychiatrists. We found emails discussing cognitive assessments and the legal requirements for guardianship petitions. The confirmation of what I had overheard that night in their home hit me like a physical blow. They had been planning this methodically, calculating how to take control of my life and my fortune. One of the psychiatrists had already penciled in an appointment for you next month, Frank continued. The email exchange suggested it was to be presented to you as a routine checkup. I thought of Thomas's recent concerns about my health, his suggestions that I might be working too hard, showing signs of stress, the groundwork for their plan. What about the children? I asked. Jason and Megan are innocent in all this. We've created educational trusts for both of them, one of the younger attorneys explained. The funds will be accessible only for legitimate educational expenses until they're 25, with you as the sole trustee until such time as you designate a successor. By late afternoon, we had a comprehensive strategy. Most of my assets would be transferred into irrevocable trusts with specific distribution guidelines. Sarah would receive a modest monthly stipend, enough to live comfortably but not extravagantly, and certainly not enough to rescue Thomas from his financial misadventures. The bulk of my estate would eventually go to carefully selected charitable foundations, with significant portions reserved for my grandchildren when they reached appropriate ages. Most importantly, I was implementing immediate changes to my business structure that would make it impossible for anyone to seize control, even in the unlikely event that their guardianship plan succeeded. As I signed the final document, Frank placed a hand on my shoulder. What will you tell Sarah? I looked up at my oldest friend, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. The truth, I said simply. It's time she heard it. After finalizing the paperwork with Frank, I declined his offer to stay at his apartment in the city. I needed space to think, to process the magnitude of what had happened and what I had set in motion. I checked into a suite at the Plaza Hotel, a place Angela and I had often stayed for special occasions. The familiar surroundings brought both comfort and a fresh wave of grief. How I wished she were here to help me navigate this betrayal. I ordered room service but barely touched the food. My phone had several missed calls and increasingly concerned text messages from Sarah. "Dad, just checking on your flight status." "Dad, are you getting a later flight today?" "Dad, we've arrived in Maui. Where are you?" "Getting worried." "Dad, please call me. The kids are asking about you." I finally responded with a brief message. "Flight complications. We'll update tomorrow. Enjoy your evening." I couldn't bring myself to maintain the charade any longer than that. Tomorrow, I would fly to Maui, but not as the compliant father they expected. I would arrive with the full weight of truth and consequences. Sleep eluded me that night. I found myself pacing the luxurious suite, replaying moments from Sarah's childhood, searching for signs I might have missed, clues to the person she would become. Had I spoiled her too much? Had I failed to instill the values that Angela and I held dear? Or was this transformation entirely due to Thomas's influence? Around 3 in the morning, I received a call from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer such a call at that hour. But given the circumstances, I was alert to any possibility. "Duke Montgomery," I answered cautiously. "Mr. Montgomery, this is Detective Wilson with the NYPD Financial Crimes Unit," a gruff voice responded. "I apologize for the late hour, but we've been trying to reach you regarding an investigation involving your son-in-law, Thomas Harrington." My heart rate accelerated. "What kind of investigation?" "We're looking into allegations of securities fraud and investor deception," the detective explained. "Several of Mr. Harrington's former clients have filed complaints alleging that he misrepresented investment opportunities and misappropriated funds." "I see," I said, processing this new information. "And you're contacting me because we understand you've provided substantial financial support to Mr. Harrington and his family. We're trying to establish a timeline of his activities and determine if any of your funds may have been used improperly." I agreed to come to the precinct in the morning before my flight to provide a statement. This development added another layer to the already complex situation. If Thomas was under criminal investigation, it explained the increasing desperation to access my wealth. They weren't just financially stressed. They were potentially facing legal consequences. The next morning, I spent 2 hours at the police station, providing documentation of my financial gifts to Sarah and Thomas over the years. The detective was professional but direct. "Mr. Montgomery, based on what we're seeing, it appears Mr. Harrington may have used some of your gifts to partially repay earlier investors in what essentially amounts to a Ponzi scheme," he explained. "Did you ever have reason to believe your funds were being misused?" "Not until very recently," I admitted. "I trusted that they were using the money for their home, the children's education, and normal living expenses." The detective nodded sympathetically. "Family trust is a powerful thing. Perpetrators often exploit it." As I left the station, I called Frank to update him on this new development. He wasn't entirely surprised. "Our investigators flagged potential securities issues," he confirmed. "But we didn't know it had escalated to a police investigation. This changes the timeline, Duke. If Thomas is charged, Sarah may try to access your assets even more aggressively to pay for his defense." "All the more reason to proceed as planned," I replied. "I'm flying to Maui this afternoon. Everything needs to be locked down before I confront them." "It's done," Frank assured me. "The documents were filed first thing this morning. The transfers are complete. They can't touch anything now without your explicit authorization." I returned to the hotel, packed my overnight bag, and checked out. Gary had the jet ready at LaGuardia for the long flight to Maui. Before boarding, I received another text from Sarah. "Dad, seriously worried now. Please call as soon as possible. Have you had flight problems this whole time?" I responded simply, "Arriving Maui this evening. We'll see you at the resort." The flight to Hawaii was 8 hours of quiet contemplation. I reviewed the documents Frank had prepared for me, including detailed evidence of Thomas's financial misdeeds and their plan to have me declared incompetent. I also had copies of the new estate plans, which I would present to Sarah directly. Gary's voice came over the intercom. as we began our descent into Maui. "We'll be landing in about 20 minutes, Mr. Montgomery. Beautiful evening here. Temperature is 82 degrees. I thanked him and gazed out at the spectacular Hawaiian sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Such beauty, such serenity, contrasting sharply with the storm I was about to unleash. A car was waiting for me at the private aviation terminal. During the drive to the Four Seasons Resort, I called Sarah to let her know I had arrived. "Dad," she exclaimed, a mixture of relief and something else in her voice. Wariness, perhaps. "We've been so worried. What happened with your flights?" "It's a long story," I said evenly. "I'm on my way to the resort now. Are you all in the room?" "Yes, we just finished dinner. The kids are watching a movie." "Good. I'd like to speak with you and Thomas privately when I arrive." A pause. "Is everything okay, Dad?" "We'll discuss it when I get there," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "See you soon." The car pulled up to the lavish resort entrance. Under different circumstances, I would have appreciated the beautiful open-air lobby with its stunning ocean views, the fragrant plumeria blossoms, the gentle Hawaiian music playing softly in the background. Instead, I checked in quickly and went directly to the elevators. Sarah was waiting in the hallway outside their suite, her expression a mixture of concern and confusion. She hugged me tightly. "Dad, what's going on? You're scaring me." "Let's go inside," I said, not returning the embrace with my usual warmth. Thomas was standing in the living room of the suite, a drink in his hand. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Duke, glad you finally made it. What a travel nightmare you've had." "Where are the children?" I asked, ignoring his false concern. "In the bedroom watching movies," Sarah answered. "Dad, please tell us what's happening." I set my briefcase on the coffee table and looked at them both. "I think you know exactly what's happening, Sarah. Or at least, Thomas does." Thomas's expression flickered, a momentary lapse in his confident facade. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know everything," I said calmly. "About your financial troubles. About your plan to have me declared incompetent and take control of my assets. About the appointment with Dr. Levine next month that was supposed to be the first step in putting me in a 5-star resort care facility in Connecticut." Sarah's face drained of color. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Sarah," I said sharply. "I heard you and Thomas discussing it in your home office 6 weeks ago. I was there, bringing a gift for Megan. I heard everything." Thomas stepped forward, his charm offensive ready. "Duke, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Yes, we were concerned about your health, your well-being as you age. That's what loving families do." "Stop." I held up my hand. "The NYPD Financial Crimes Unit contacted me last night, Thomas. They're investigating you for securities fraud. They believe you've been running something akin to a Ponzi scheme." Now it was Thomas who paled, his confident demeanor crumbling. Sarah turned to him, shock evident on her face. "Thomas? What is he talking about?" "It's nothing," Thomas said quickly. "A misunderstanding with some former clients. It'll blow over." "It won't blow over," I corrected him. "And neither will this. Yesterday at the airport wasn't a security delay, Sarah. It was a test. A test to see if you would choose your father or your husband's agenda. You failed that test spectacularly." Sarah sank onto the sofa, her expression stricken. "The airport? You mean you were there? You could have made the flight?" "I was watching from across the terminal," I confirmed. "I called out to you. You saw me, Sarah. You looked me in the eye, and you chose to walk away." "I didn't. We had connections to make," she stammered. The kids were excited. "Stop making excuses," I said firmly. "You left me behind because Thomas convinced you that I'm nothing more than an obstacle to the wealth you believe you deserve." Thomas's demeanor changed abruptly, the charming facade disappearing entirely. "You've always been stingy with your fortune," he snapped. "All these years, doling out just enough to keep us dependent, while you sit on hundreds of millions. Sarah is your only child. That money should be securing her future, our children's future." "Thomas!" Sarah gasped, but the damage was done. I looked at my son-in-law with something approaching pity. "Thank you for finally being honest, Thomas. It's refreshing after years of your manipulations. I opened my briefcase and removed the folder of documents. While you were flying to Hawaii yesterday, I was meeting with my attorneys. Everything has changed. My will, my trusts, the company structure, all of it. I handed the summary document to Sarah, whose hands trembled as she took it. You'll receive a monthly stipend, enough to live comfortably but modestly. The children have educational trusts that will provide for their schooling and reasonable expenses until they're 25, at which point they'll receive significant inheritances if they've shown themselves to be responsible adults. You can't do this, Thomas sputtered, his face reddening. I already have, I replied calmly. It's done, signed, filed, and irrevocable. Sarah was reading the document, tears streaming down her face. Dad, please don't do this. We can work this out. There's nothing to work out, Sarah. You and Thomas plotted to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized so you could take control of my assets. If I hadn't discovered your plan, I would have lost everything, including my freedom. It wasn't like that, she protested weakly. It was exactly like that, I countered. And the fact that you still can't admit it tells me this is the right decision. Thomas lunged for the papers, snatching them from Sarah's hands. This is absurd. We'll challenge it. No court will uphold this when they learn you're not mentally competent. I smiled thinly. I had 3 independent psychological evaluations last week. Thomas, the results are included in that packet. I'm not only competent, I'm apparently functioning at a cognitive level 20 years younger than my actual age. The door to the bedroom opened, and Jason peered out curiously. Grandpa? You're here. I softened my expression immediately. Hello, Jason. Yes, I finally made it. Megan appeared behind her brother, her face lighting up. Grandpa. She ran to me for a hug, which I gladly gave her. Kids, go back to your movie, Thomas ordered sharply. The adults are talking. I kept my arms around Megan. Actually, I'd love to say goodnight to my grandchildren properly. I've had a very long journey. I spent the next 15 minutes with Jason and Megan, listening to their excited chatter about the flight, the resort's pools, and their plans for the week. I assured them we would still have our planned activities together, that nothing had changed in my love for them. When they finally returned to their movie, I turned back to Sarah and Thomas, my expression hardening once more. I'm staying in the presidential suite on the top floor, I informed them. I'll see the children for breakfast at 8. We can discuss practical arrangements then, including your return flights, which I've already rebooked for the day after tomorrow. You're cutting our vacation short? Sarah asked incredulously. Your vacation ended the moment you abandoned me at that airport gate, I replied. Consider the next 2 days a grace period to explain to your children why their Hawaiian adventure is being abbreviated. I suggest you blame it on Thomas's urgent legal troubles, which, I assure you, are very real. With that, I picked up my briefcase and walked to the door. Sarah called after me, her voice breaking. Dad, please, we can fix this. I turned back one last time. Some things can't be fixed, Sarah. Trust is like a mirror. Once it's broken, you can never look at it the same way again. I closed the door behind me, hearing Thomas's angry voice already rising as he berated Sarah. In that moment, despite everything, I felt a stab of sadness for my daughter. She had made her choices, hitching her star to a man who would likely drag her down with him. But she was still my child, and a part of me would always love her, even if I could never trust her again. After leaving Sarah and Thomas's suite, I returned to my own accommodations, the presidential suite with its panoramic views of the Pacific Ocean. Under different circumstances, it would have been the perfect setting for a family vacation. Now it felt like a war room from which I would launch the next phase of my strategy. I poured myself 2 fingers of scotch and stepped onto the balcony. The moon created a silver pathway across the dark water, and the gentle sound of waves breaking on the shore below provided a soothing counterpoint to the emotional turbulence of the evening. I pulled out my phone and called Frank. It's done, I told him when he answered. I've confronted them and delivered the documents. How did they take it? Frank asked. About as well as you'd expect. Thomas showed his true colors almost immediately. Sarah is still playing the victim, unwilling to admit her role in all this. And the children? I smiled despite everything. They're innocent in all this, Frank. They were just happy to see their grandpa. What's your next move? He asked. I need to speak with the resort management about some changes to our accommodations. Then I'm meeting Sarah and the children for breakfast tomorrow to establish the new parameters. After that, we implement Phase 2. Phase 2 was what Frank and I had dubbed the broader restructuring of my business and personal affairs. It went beyond merely protecting my assets from Sarah and Thomas. It was about reshaping my legacy entirely. After ending the call with Frank, I contacted the resort manager, explaining that there had been a change in our family plans. I requested that Sarah and Thomas's suite be relocated to a different part of the resort for their final 2 days, while I would keep the adjacent family suite for my grandchildren. The children will be staying with me for the remainder of their time here, I explained. Their parents will be departing early due to a family emergency. The manager was discreet and accommodating, promising to have the new arrangements in place by morning. I then made several other calls, to my executive team back in New York, to my private banker, and finally to Detective Wilson at the NYPD Financial Crimes Unit, providing him with Thomas's current location in Hawaii. Sleep came easier that night than it had in weeks. There was a certain peace in finally confronting the truth, painful though it was. I woke at dawn and spent an hour on the balcony, watching the sunrise paint the sky in breathtaking colors. By 7:30, I was dressed and ready for breakfast with my grandchildren. I arrived at the resort's oceanfront restaurant to find Jason and Megan already waiting, but no sign of Sarah or Thomas. Good morning, you two. I greeted them with genuine warmth. Where are your parents? They were fighting, Megan said quietly. Mom was crying a lot. Dad said they needed to talk privately, Jason added, his expression serious beyond his 12 years. He told us to come down and wait for you. I sat down between them, ordering a round of tropical fruit pancakes for all of us. Well, I'm glad we get this time together. There are some changes to our vacation that I need to tell you about. I explained in age-appropriate terms that their parents needed to return to New York early because of some important business that couldn't wait. But the good news is, if it's okay with you, you'll both stay here with me for the full week as planned. Their faces lit up at this prospect. Despite the circumstances, I found myself enjoying their excitement as they talked about all the activities we could do together. Snorkeling, surfing lessons, the luau they'd read about. Sarah arrived just as we were finishing breakfast, her eyes red-rimmed and her posture defeated. Thomas was conspicuously absent. Good morning, Mom, Megan called cheerfully. Grandpa says we get to stay with him while you and Dad go home. Can we, please? Sarah looked at me, then at her hopeful children. We'll see, sweetie. I need to talk to Grandpa first. Why don't you two check out the kids' club while your mom and I chat? I suggested. I heard they have a cool tide pool exploration this morning. Once the children were out of earshot, Sarah slumped into a chair across from me. Thomas is packing, she said flatly. He says there's no point in staying if you're cutting us off. I'm not cutting you off, Sarah, I corrected her. I'm establishing boundaries that should have been in place long ago. By taking away my inheritance, by separating me from my children for the rest of this trip. Your inheritance isn't a right, it's a privilege, I replied calmly. And as for the children, they deserve to enjoy the vacation that was promised to them. You and Thomas have other priorities now, namely his legal troubles. She looked away, blinking back tears. Thomas says you're bluffing about the police investigation. Call Detective Wilson yourself. I slid a business card across the table. The NYPD doesn't bluff about securities fraud. Sarah stared at the card but didn't take it. What am I supposed to do, Dad? If what you're saying is true, if Thomas really is in legal trouble, then you have some difficult decisions to make, I finished for her. Starting with whether you want to go down with him or save yourself and your children. That's not fair, she protested weakly. None of this is fair, Sarah. It wasn't fair when you and Thomas plotted to have me declared incompetent. It wasn't fair when you abandoned me at the airport. Life isn't fair, but it is full of choices and consequences. I signaled for the check, then continued. Here's what's going to happen. You and Thomas will return to New York tomorrow as scheduled. The children will remain here with me for the rest of the week. When we return, you'll have 30 days to decide if you want to remain in the house I purchased for you, which will now have a formal lease agreement with a modest rent, or if you prefer to make other arrangements. You're making me pay rent for my own home? She asked incredulously. It was never your home, Sarah. It was a gift I gave you, which you and Thomas have taken for granted along with everything else. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. And if Thomas is actually charged with something, then I strongly suggest you obtain separate legal representation immediately, I advised. Frank can recommend someone excellent who specializes in protecting spouses from the financial fallout of their partner's crimes. A spark of hope flickered in her eyes. You'd help me with that? You're still my daughter, Sarah. I'm deeply disappointed in you, and the trust between us is severely damaged, but I don't want to see you suffer unnecessarily. I paused, making sure she understood the gravity of my next words. However, my assistance is conditional on your complete honesty from this point forward. No more schemes, no more manipulation. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text message from the resort manager, informing me that the suite arrangements had been completed. I stood up from the table. The children's things have been moved to the family suite connected to mine. Your new accommodations are in the West Wing, room 3118. The key cards are waiting at the front desk. You're separating us from our children. Sarah's voice rose slightly. I'm giving them stability for the remainder of this vacation, while you and Thomas sort out your situation, I corrected her. They'll be with you all day if you choose. But given what Megan said about the fighting and crying this morning, I think some space might be beneficial for everyone. Sarah's expression crumpled. I never meant for any of this to happen, Dad. For the first time since the airport, I felt a flicker of genuine empathy for her. I believe you, Sarah. I think you got caught up in Thomas's web and lost sight of what really matters. The question now is, what are you going to do about it? I left her sitting there, staring out at the ocean, hopefully contemplating the crossroads she had reached. The next phase of my plan was already in motion, and it didn't depend on Sarah's choices. I had reclaimed control of my life and my legacy, and it felt like breathing fresh air after years of subtle manipulation. Back in my suite, I found multiple messages waiting. My executive team confirmed that the company restructuring was proceeding smoothly. My banker reported that the new trusts were fully funded and operational. And most significantly, Detective Wilson informed me that he had coordinated with Hawaiian authorities to serve Thomas with formal notice of the investigation. By late afternoon, the resort was buzzing with discreet activity as police officers arrived to speak with Thomas. I kept the children occupied with a snorkeling excursion, safely away from the unfolding drama. When we returned, tired and sunburned but happy, I learned that Thomas had been formally served with papers requiring his appearance for questioning upon his return to New York. That evening, I hosted a private dinner for Jason and Megan on my suite's terrace. They were full of stories about the fish they'd seen, the coral formations, the sea turtles that had swum alongside us. Their resilience and innocence were powerful reminders of what truly mattered. Grandpa, Jason said as we finished our dessert, are Mom and Dad getting divorced? The directness of the question caught me off guard. What makes you ask that, Jason? He shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, though his eyes betrayed his concern. They fight all the time now, and Dad's always worried about money, even though he pretends he's not. And now there were police talking to him today. I saw them when I went back to get my other swimsuit. I considered my response carefully. I don't know what your parents will decide, Jason, but I want you and Megan to know that no matter what happens, you will always be taken care of, and you will always be loved. Promise? Megan asked in a small voice. I promise, I said firmly, including them both in my gaze. Some things in life change, but my love for you never will. Later that night, after the children were asleep in their rooms, Sarah came to speak with me alone. She looked different somehow, the entitled arrogance replaced by a humility I hadn't seen in years. The police left a few hours ago, she said, accepting the cup of tea I offered. Thomas Island, not handling it well. I imagine not, I replied neutrally. He keeps saying it's all a misunderstanding, that he can explain everything. She shook her head slowly. But I called that detective, the one whose card you gave me. It's not a misunderstanding, is it? No, Sarah. It's not. Thomas has been defrauding investors for years. Some of the money you've been living on, the vacations, the country club memberships, it all came from other people's retirement funds and life savings. She covered her face with her hands. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know the details. I just knew we needed money. And Thomas said he had investments that would pay off soon. And the plan to have me declared incompetent? I asked, needing to hear her admission. Her hands dropped, and she looked at me directly for the first time. That was his idea, at first, she said quietly. He kept saying you were showing signs of confusion, that you weren't managing the business well anymore. I didn't believe him initially, but he was persuasive, and we were desperate. And you went along with it, I stated rather than asked. Yes, she whispered. I convinced myself it was for your own good, that you needed care and supervision. But deep down, I knew it wasn't true. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, Dad. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I see now how wrong it was. It wasn't everything I wanted to hear, but it was a start. A crack in the wall of denial she had built around herself. What will you do now? I asked. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't know. Thomas is insisting I stand by him, that this will all blow over. But I keep thinking about what you said this morning, about going down with him, or saving myself and the kids. And I think I need to choose my children, she said with newfound resolve. I need to choose what's right, even if it's hard. I nodded, satisfied with her answer. That's the first wise decision you've made in a long time, Sarah. She managed a sad smile. I've made a lot of mistakes, Dad. I don't know if I can fix them all. You can't, I said honestly. Some damage can't be undone, but you can move forward differently. You can rebuild, not what was, but something new that has integrity at its foundation. As she left my suite that night, I felt the first glimmer of hope that perhaps, in time, some version of a relationship with my daughter might be salvaged from the wreckage of betrayal. It wouldn't be the same. It couldn't be. But it might eventually become something honest and real, in a way our previous relationship had not been. I turned my attention to finalizing the details of Phase 2, the comprehensive reshaping of my business empire and personal legacy that would ensure my wealth would be used responsibly long after I was gone. The documents Frank had prepared were waiting for my final review, outlining the creation of the Montgomery Foundation, which would focus on educational opportunities for underprivileged youth and housing security for vulnerable seniors. It was work that gave me purpose beyond the pain of recent events. As I made notes and adjustments to the Foundation's mission statement late into the night, I felt Angela's presence almost tangibly, as if she were sitting beside me, nodding her approval. You always said money was only valuable if it did good in the world, I whispered to her memory. I'm finally getting it right, my love. The remaining days in Hawaii unfolded with a strange mixture of joy and tension. I spent my days with Jason and Megan, creating the carefree vacation memories I had originally envisioned, building elaborate sandcastles, taking surfing lessons, exploring tide pools teeming with colorful marine life. The children's resilience amazed me. Despite the undercurrent of adult drama, they managed to immerse themselves in the simple pleasures of our activities. Sarah joined us for most outings, making a visible effort to be present and engaged. Thomas, however, remained largely absent, closeted in their room making frantic phone calls or meeting with a local attorney he had hastily retained. When he did appear, his charm had been replaced by a barely contained panic that he attempted to mask with bravado. On our final evening in Maui, I arranged a private sunset dinner cruise for myself, Sarah, and the children. Thomas declined to join us, citing urgent business matters. As we sailed along the coast, watching whales breach in the distance and the sun sink toward the horizon in a spectacular display of color, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in months. Jason and Megan were at the bow of the boat with the captain, learning about navigation, giving Sarah and me a rare moment of privacy. I filed for separation this morning, she said quietly, her eyes on the distant mountains. My attorney back home is preparing the paperwork for a formal divorce. I nodded, unsurprised but pleased. That's a significant step. It's the right one, she replied with newfound certainty. After talking with Detective Wilson again yesterday, I realized the extent of what Thomas has done. It's worse than I imagined, Dad. There are people who lost everything. Are you prepared for what comes next? I asked. The legal proceedings, the potential financial repercussions, the public scrutiny. She squared her shoulders slightly. I'm trying to be. My attorney thinks I can demonstrate that I wasn't knowingly involved in Thomas's schemes, but there will still be consequences. The house, the lifestyle we've had, it's all going to change. Change can be clarifying, I observed. It has a way of revealing what truly matters. Sarah looked toward her children, a soft smile touching her lips despite everything. They're what matters. I see that now, more clearly than ever. We fell silent for a moment. The gentle rocking of the boat and the distant sound of the children's laughter creating a peaceful backdrop to our conversation. I've been thinking about what happens when we get home, Sarah said eventually. About your new arrangements for the trust and everything. And, I prompted when she hesitated, and I want you to know that I understand why you did it. I don't like it, obviously, but I understand it. Trust has to be earned, and I betrayed yours in the worst possible way. It was the most direct acknowledgement she had offered, and I appreciated it for what it was. A step toward honesty, if not full reconciliation. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It matters. Will you help me learn how to stand on my own? She asked, vulnerability evident in her voice. Not financially. I don't mean that. I mean, as a person. I've been defined by Thomas for so long, and before that, I was defined by being your daughter. I need to figure out who Sarah really island. The question touched me deeply. Despite everything that had happened, here was my child asking for guidance, not handouts. It was perhaps the most authentic moment we had shared in years. I will, I promised, but not by doing things for you, by believing that you can do them yourself. She nodded, understanding the distinction. That's what I need. A father, not a safety net. When we returned to New York 3 days later, the reality of our new circumstances began to take concrete form. Thomas was immediately summoned for questioning by the Financial Crimes Unit. Sarah moved into a modest apartment I helped her find, taking the children with her. The Westchester house was placed on the market, part of the asset liquidation process that would eventually provide some restitution to Thomas's victims. 6 months passed, bringing significant changes to all our lives. Thomas was indicted on multiple counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and financial elder abuse. He accepted a plea deal to avoid a lengthier sentence, but still faced 8 to 10 years in federal prison. The divorce was finalized, with Sarah receiving full custody of the children. True to her word, Sarah embarked on a journey of self-discovery and independence. She found work as an administrative assistant at a nonprofit organization, a far cry from the luxury she had been accustomed to, but she approached it with unexpected enthusiasm and dedication. She enrolled in evening classes to renew her lapsed accounting certification, determined to build a career that could support her family. I maintained appropriate boundaries while remaining present in their lives. The children spent weekends with me, and I attended their school events and sports competitions without fail. I established regular business mentoring sessions with Sarah, where we discussed her career development and financial independence strategies, rather than her personal needs. The Montgomery Foundation launched with significant fanfare in the philanthropic community, its mission to provide educational opportunities and housing security already making an impact across 3 states. I found renewed purpose in this work, channeling Angela's compassionate spirit into programs that would outlast me. On a crisp autumn day, almost exactly 1 year after the fateful airport incident, Sarah and the children joined me for dinner at my home. After the meal, the kids retreated to the media room to watch a movie, leaving Sarah and me alone in the study. I have something for you, she said, pulling an envelope from her purse. It's not much, but it's important to me that you have it. Inside was a check for $30,000. It's the full amount of the loan you gave me to secure my apartment last year, she explained. I've been saving from every paycheck. My promotion came with a raise that finally made it possible to pay you back completely. I studied the check, touched by the gesture more than the amount. It represented something far more valuable than money. Responsibility, integrity, a promise kept. I'm proud of you, Sarah, I said simply. Not because you paid me back, but because you're building a life of substance and character. I learned it from you, she replied softly. Eventually, we had come a long way from that terrible moment at the airport gate when she had turned away without a backward glance. The trust between us was still being rebuilt, brick by careful brick. But the foundation was stronger now because it was based on truth rather than expectation or obligation. As I approach my 70th birthday, I reflect often on the lessons this painful chapter has taught me. Money can be both a blessing and a curse, depending on how it shapes the character of those who have it and those who want it. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in relationships built on mutual respect and integrity. And sometimes, the most loving thing we can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their actions. I think of Angela often, wondering what she would make of all that has transpired. I like to believe she would approve of the boundaries I've established and the foundation that bears our name. I know she would be proud of the woman Sarah is becoming and the wonderful grandchildren who visit me now because they want to, not because of what I might give them. Life rarely gives us neat, happy endings. What it offers instead are opportunities for growth, for redemption, for creating meaning out of our most painful experiences. That airport moment wasn't the end of my story with Sarah. It was the beginning of a more honest one. So if you're facing betrayal or difficult family dynamics in your own life, remember that sometimes you have to be strong enough to say no to those you love most. Setting boundaries isn't about punishment. It's about creating space for authenticity and genuine connection to grow. True love sometimes requires tough decisions. The path forward may not be easy, but integrity never island. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision regarding a family member who betrayed your trust? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences that might help you navigate your own challenging relationships. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's never too late to rebuild what's broken, even if it takes a different form than what you originally envisioned.